What's going on, everybody? Good late morning. It is time to continue our look at the top college prospects from this most recent week of football. Now we're doing the defensive side. Once again, I'm not doing every position. I'm doing the positions that I am personally interested in as a Seahawks fan. And on this side of the ball, we did a lot better this week. I didn't like what I saw offensively for the most part. The defense, there was some good stuff going on. So let me just say that. Feels like as of this moment, and this can change at any time, the strength of the draft will be on the defensive side of the ball. But guys who stood out to me, let's start with the nose tackles. Again, nose tackles kind of a difficult thing to approximate because a lot of these guys are too good to just be nose tackles in the league. But Deontay Walker of Kentucky, 5 tackles, 1 for loss, a pass deflection, pass batted down, whatever you want to call it. Now, Kentucky got destroyed, 48 points and almost 200 rushing yards, but Deontay Walker, as near as I could tell, did his job. 66 PFF grade's pretty decent. He's played better, but he continues to be a guy that I am keeping my eye on in the middle there because I think he's a lot of fun. Probably a little too good for us to get, though, if we're being real. Kenneth Grant also might be in that boat. Michigan guy. He's probably a top 15 pick. 4 tackles, 1 for loss, 2 pressures. Michigan allowed 21 points. And you got to remember, they are fighting their rears off trying to win games right now in Michigan defensively. And their offense just cannot support them at all. So holding any team to 21 points is still an achievement for them. 187 rushing yards. But again, you're going to give up rushing yards when your offense can't do anything. So I don't even hold that against him. 74.6 PFF grade. He's certainly going to be a first-round pick. Nazir Stackhouse. Not a huge presence in the numbers, but Georgia's defense clamped down on Texas, which is always going to get a lot of credit from me. And they didn't let Texas run the ball at all. Texas had less than 30 rushing yards, averaged just over 1 yard a carry, 15 points. And one of those touchdowns was set up by a super short field, not really meaningful. Nazir Stackhouse, 3 tackles, half a tackle for loss, 1 pressure, 68.4 PFF grade. He's doing his job. And that Georgia defense does not have the giant stack of blue chippers that they usually do. They have good players, and we're going to talk about more of them later in this video, but it's not like it usually is. And then Dante Corleone of UC, 4 tackles, half a tackle for loss. Cincinnati only allowed 14 points. Now, they got run on, and a lot of the top nose tackles this week were part of some run defenses that didn't play that great. 68.3 PFF grade. Pretty good, though. 4.8 yards a carry when you're only allowing 14 points. I'm not going to pretend it's good, but you can certainly live with it. So that's it for the nose tackles, although that's more than we usually get. I'm feeling pretty happy about that, personally. Edge rusher. There was some really interesting stuff going on this week. We have some new names here. James Pierce Jr., he's still considered to be the top guy, but even though he's pretty clearly out of our reach, I got to talk about him because he just blew up on Alabama. 3 tackles, 1.5 for loss, which was the sack and a half he had, but 10 pressures. You don't see 10 pressures from one player in college football against Alabama's offensive line very often. Now, that's a testament to Alabama not being what they used to be, but not just anybody can get 10 pressures in one game. So James Pierce Jr., big reason why Tennessee held defensively, 17 points allowed, 239 passing yards, not even 5.5 yards per pass, 78.5 PFF. Yeah, he's really starting to break out here. Also going off would be Mykel Williams of Georgia. Big reason why the Bulldogs were so dominant in that game on defense. Off the edge, 3 tackles, 2 sacks, which were the 2 tackles for loss. Forced a fumble, 4 pressures. Georgia allows 15 points and 230 passing yards, 4.7 yards per pass. Really good. Remember, it's Texas. 62.2 PFF grade. I think he got dinged for some bad tackling, but when you're this destructive off the edge, I'm going to give you a lot of credit for that. And then we've got some guys that we haven't talked about at all, or maybe we've talked about once so far this year. Antoine Powell of Vautech had a really big game. Although he was having such a hard time tackling, his grade from PFF was still pretty bad. You're not going to see this that often. He had 7 tackles and 4 sacks in one game, but he missed like 4 tackles. So think about how good the game could have been if he tackled well. But you get 4 sacks in a game, you're going to get some attention from me. 1 fumble recovery as well, 5 pressures, 21 points allowed, 205 passing yards allowed. Now, the other team didn't throw the ball very much, so it was still about 8 yards per pass, which is not anything remarkable in either direction. And 64.8 PFF grade because he can't tackle, which, too bad, but he played a really good game. Very impactful. Next up would be David Bailey of Stanford. We may have spoken about him before, I'm not sure, but he went out there for Stanford, a team that is really bereft of talent and ability right now, and did what he could. 6 tackles, including a sack, 6 quarterback pressures, but he cannot stop Stanford from allowing 40 points, almost 12 yards per pass. Still gets that 83 PFF grade. So he's really trying to hold steady there on the edge for Stanford, and there ain't much holding that team together right now, but he is doing what he can, so salute to him. Let's give him some credit here in this weekly segment. And on the opposite sideline in that game was Elijah Roberts of the SMU Mustangs. 3 tackles, tackle and a half for loss, half a sack, 5 pressures. And unlike David Bailey, he got backed up by a really good defensive effort. They allowed only 10 points and 173 passing yards, which is 4.7 yards per pass to Stanford. Only a 64.5 PFF grade. I think he got dinged on the tackling as well. But I thought it would be fun to throw in a new name there, even if he didn't necessarily get graded the best. Just something new, right? Because there's actually a lot of edge rusher stuff in this draft, and I don't want to just talk about the top guys every week. Linebacker. I'm happy to report that I thought the linebackers this week were much better than typical. There's a lot of stuff here that I liked. There might even be a guy or two I left off. So finally, some interesting linebacker stuff. Now, the top guy this week has to be Jalen Walker. Thank you. And honestly, Jalen Walker, he might not even really be a linebacker, but I think it's pretty clear that the plan with Jalen Walker is for him to be like Micah Parsons, where he goes to the edge on passing downs, but plays box linebacker otherwise. And in this game, he certainly did that, and he looked like a stud. 8 tackles, 3 for loss, which were the 3 sacks. He didn't even line up on the edge that much in this game. It was like 18 reps, and he got 3 sacks, recovered a fumble, 7 total pressures. Alabama's defense is pretty dominant against an elite offense, including 1.1 yard per carry allowed, 79.7 PFF grade. That might have been his coming out party, and there is a scenario where he's there when the Seahawks pick in 2025 first round, and it would be hard for me to pass that up. It would be hard for me to look at him and think anything other than this could easily be the next Micah Parsons. Danny Stutzman, big game here for Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma's in a bad way right now, but Danny Stutzman is trying 16 tackles, including tackle and a half for loss. Now, I know OU gave up the 35 points to South Carolina. They're not good. Their defense is not good. But 74 rushing yards, 1.8 yards per carry. The run defense was solid. 72.2 for Stutzman. I don't think he had any missed tackles according to PFF in this game, by the way. So he was doing his thing. Geod Campbell for Alabama in a loss. I'm going to give him a shout out here. I thought he played well. 7 tackles and a fumble recovery. Got a quarterback pressure. And Alabama did get run on, admittedly. 214 rushing yards is a bad look. 64.8 PFF grade, but I like Geod Campbell. I like some of the things he's bringing here. He's really coming on. I think he'll be a name to watch when the draft comes around, especially in this class. Jay Higgins of Iowa, another big game for him. 14 tackles and a pass knockdown. Iowa did get beat up defensively. They allowed 32 points and 212 rushing yards. 63.9 PFF grade, so it wasn't all great, but he was certainly all over the field and always around the ball. We can say that, right? Final guy is another Alabama linebacker, which is kind of weird when Alabama didn't play that well, but it's not like their defense was the main reason they lost. That had more to do with their offense. So 11 tackles, 1 for loss, a sack, 4 pressures, 24 points allowed. I mean, 24 points allowed is not that bad. It's not dominant, but you would expect Alabama to win any game they only allow 24 points in. 214 rushing yards allowed, 5 yards a carry. Again, it's not very good. But Lawson got a lot of credit from PFF, 87.5. So Defensive back is the last group here. We've got 4 safeties and a kind of slot corner. And again, I thought this was a really good week for this group. Xavier Watts leads us off, Notre Dame guy, 4 tackles and a pick. Also had a pass breakup. He had a quarterback pressure, allowed 17 receiving yards on 4 targets, so very efficient in coverage. Notre Dame allowed all of 13 points, little more than 7 yards per pass, 71.5 PFF grade, 269 passing yards allowed total, so good game for Xavier Watts. Still a really good ball hawk, should be a very coveted player in this draft. Malachi Starks gets a shout out here for Georgia in their really impressive defensive effort. Got to give him credit there. 7 tackles, 1 for loss. Didn't allow a single receiving yard in this game, and he got targeted 3 times. And he allowed 2 completions, too, so he's just making plays. 15 points allowed. You guys know how well Georgia played defensively in that game. 77 PFF grade. So Starks getting it done. Nick Amanwari had maybe the game of his life for South Carolina against Oklahoma, really kind of sending them to the shadow realm. 11 tackles, 1 for loss, 2 picks, including 1 he took back to the house. Allowed 31 receiving yards, but it was only 4.5 yards per target, so it was, what, 7 targets, I think? So I'll live with 31 receiving yards on 7 targets. Oklahoma only scores 9 points, 238 passing yards, just over 5.5 yards per pass, so really inefficient there, and a 90.9 PFF grade. Hard to beat that. So Nick Amanwari definitely pushing up into that first round. I think he'll be there. I don't think he's the best safety in this class still, but he's starting to make an argument for it. Pretty much every week I feel like I'm talking about this guy. So here's a guy that I haven't been talking about every week. In fact, I'm pretty sure he's new to this weekly series. Kamari Ramsey, a safety from USC who's starting to make some waves here. USC lost. They didn't play particularly well against Maryland. I mean, they lost to Maryland, so that's bad. But Ramsey, 7 tackles, including a sack, which was the tackle for loss, 2 pass breakups, allowed 41 receiving yards, but it was only 6 yards per target, so he got targeted a decent amount. I can live with 41 yards on 5.9 yards per target. They did allow 29 points. They did allow almost 400 passing yards. Again, you can see how much of that is not on Ramsey's head. 73.1 PFF grade. So he played well. That USC defense just doesn't have a lot of talent. Not a lot they can do. Goodness me. Ugh. Finally, really interesting game from Jahdae Barron. Jahdae Barron, Texas, kind of accounted for more points than their offense, right? Like when Texas was dead, he brought them back to life. And the fact that they weren't able to get back in that game was a pretty bad indictment on their offense. But Jahdae Barron, 4 tackles, 2 picks, 36 yards in return yards, 1 pass breakup outside of the interceptions. But he gets completely lit up for 74 yards in the receiving area on 10 targets, right? 7.4 yards per target. And Georgia only threw the ball for 175 yards. So they clearly saw something they liked with Barron out there and went after him like crazy. He gave up single-handedly, 40% of their passing yards? But he gets the 2 picks. I feel like it's worth it. But 74 yards from a slot corner / linebacker in coverage, there is a little bit of a Trayvon Diggs syndrome there, right? Where you're making plays on the ball, but is it worth all the times you get whipped? I don't know. I mean, Texas didn't win, but it wasn't because of Carson Beck or anything the passing game did. 67.6 PFF grade, so even PFF doesn't really know what to think, right? The interceptions are there, but did he play well? They don't know. All right, that's it for this week. Let me know what you think. I like what I'm seeing from this group right now. This defense, if crop, does not look bad at all. All right, see you guys later. Go Hawks. More videos coming soon.